Okay, we're good to go.
Okay. Welcome to the Node.js Foundation Build Working Group meeting, September 29. Here present are Michael Dawson, Johan Bergstrom, and Alexis Campillo. So why don't we start with a quick stand-up of what we've been working on since the last meeting, which was over a month ago, I think.
Okay, if you want to go in the order of the list on the present, I'll start. I've been doing some work around getting us additional resources from SoftLayer for the build working group. I was been working on AIX builds. So we've had those AIX builds in the IBM deliveries, but I want to bring them to the community as well. So working to take those changes and put them into a state where I can start contributing them back. As well as finally finished off adding to the Ansible inventory the Power Big Endian machine. So I think that's it for me.
Cool, I'll follow. Most of my stuff has been reworking and improving how we download and use ICU. We've had a lot of problems from our slaves, just download issues. One part of that solution was pretty much using SourceForge for mirrors, but we still have problems. So what I'm doing is just replacing Python with wget or curl, which is part of our required toolkit for slaves, which means that we can do retries and we can do resumable downloads. I'm also working with a lot of the FreeBSD stuff. Since the FreeBSD machines we have, the primary slaves are in jails. We get a bit of a different networking setup than just your regular VM or OS install. So the problem is essentially that like broadcasting and localhost and similar basic stuff is a bit magic. So it's kind of an ongoing issue, but we're still having problems with a few tests as a result of broadcast not working properly. And I've also done some minor improvements to init scripts for all machines, but I think by next meeting we should have pretty much everything either through systemd or Upstart or any other init system that gives us the improvement of auto restarting slaves, because that's a bit of an issue for us. Alexis?
Yeah. Well, since a month ago, I guess we did launch the node accept pull request job to land pull requests in Jenkins, and then failed miserably to get it to work. So that was a good lesson in learning all the bottlenecks of the current CI system. So I guess now we're planning to go and address them. We did make some progress on the ARM build. We implemented a parallel build with cross-compile and then test parallelize across multiple machines. So now the build is finally under half an hour, which is great. Still a lot of flakiness to be addressed, and we haven't made much progress yet on that. We got sidetracked on other things. Another thing we did was add Ansible support for Windows. So now Windows machines can be installed with Ansible. And we started adding some Windows 10 states in CI. I think that's it for me.
Just a quick question. In terms of the accept pull request, was it mostly the flakiness or the length of time that was causing us grief, or maybe, I guess, a combination of both?
Well, the combination of both. I mean, the flakiness is just at a level where it's acceptable. We started collecting a list of flaky tests. I mean, we thought we already collected before we launched it, but then it was failing all the time because of flaky tests. So we started collecting flaky tests from all the runs, and we got up to 28 flaky tests or something like that. And we still couldn't land that PR because it would keep failing for a new flaky test every time.
Right.
So it looked like it was cursed almost.
Yeah.
So there's something fundamentally wrong, or there was. I mean, my guess is that maybe there are some dangling node instances from the previous run. That would be a good guess. Also, there are some instability in the slaves themselves, right? They disconnect or
Right.
they're not completely reliable. So we need to address all these factors and make sure that it's very solid before we
Yeah,
can.
'cause, I mean, I guess that those are almost as bad for the people running them, because if you're running the job and you have to figure out what's going on for those flaky tests, even if it doesn't block you, it's still a pain.
Yeah, I mean, it should be reliable 99% of the time, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not useful. I mean, the thing is that we used it before in the old Jenkins for
Yep.
join node, and we used it there for almost a year with almost not any problems.
Yeah.
The infrastructure was much smaller. There were only a few permutations of platforms that we were testing on.
Okay. I think it's still a good. I assume we still want to get back there, because it's certainly good that you, like, I guess without something like that, the flaky test can kind of build up.
Yes, yes. It will help keeping regressions in check. I mean, it already in that short experiment, it did catch a few regressions.
Right.
Yeah, I think
Eliminates the human error possibility, right? Because people do make mistakes. Maybe they forget to run a test or things like that.
Yeah.
I think
But the
one
infrastructure needs to be reliable. Yeah, sorry.
one issue we had was pretty much it was introduced like less than a week from the release, so the timing was pretty,
Yeah, that
it was,
might
it was
have been.
so we're gonna, I think when we want to introduce it, it should just be like straight after release, or when we have like a stable 2 week period between. I mean, that was pretty much built up to 4, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Like
Yeah, the
maybe
timing
after
was a bit premature.
Yeah.
we cut 5 or something, then we should put it back in.
Yeah, so like everyone is pretty okay with adding latency before getting anything merged. I think the mindset was like that's at least what I kind of noticed at GitHub, that there was a bit annoyance there, and I think everyone understands like what we're doing and what the end goal is, but it's just that at the end of the day, code needs to come in, especially closing to release. So
Yeah.
So the exploration phase and the flakiness phase is probably much more accepted once we don't have that pressure.
Yeah, I grossly underestimated the flakiness. That's part of the problem. I thought that we would have released it, mark a couple of tests as flaky, and then work on the ARM build
Right.
the following week, but the flakiness is out of control. So until we address that, we cannot use it again.
I think, our test suite is, if you look at what Rich Trott is doing, he's spending a lot of time on fixing a lot of our tests and making them run faster. I think a lot of people are, but I've seen him very active around that. So, in time, I think as we improve the quality of the test suite, it'll be much easier for us. But it's just, we have so much discrepancy in terms of, how the machines are configured, and it's just a quality assurance thing, and like the best thing in those situations is usually just to have a lot of time on both ends.
Yes, no, it is feasible to address it. Another thing that I think would help is have all the slaves running containers or VMs, things that could be reset to a known snapshot for every run, to have a predictable state.
Yeah.
But these are things that I need to investigate, or we need to investigate. I still don't know how. It requires work to make it implement it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been talking about that a few times. I think you and I mainly, Alexis, cleaning on successful builds or successful tests, and killing processes before we start a new run and stuff like that.
Yes.
So I guess we should just put that into play then. Just assign it to I guess between us, and then we just get that done.
Yeah, it is on my to-do list. Just got sidetracked.
Yeah, I know it's in mine as well somewhere. So
okay. We'll get to it.
Yeah, I think those two things, definitely cleaning disk space and killing all processes would go a long way.
We're actually getting to, I think, the most common trailing processes. The ones that bring us a lot of problems are dangling processes that does like a worker or master slave thing, and then talks through TCP/IP, so they spawn on a port, and then you have 5 other tests using common.port, which will be a problem. And I can only assume, like, since a lot of, or I cannot assume, I don't know it well enough, but I think there might be something that 2 tests in parallel in the parallel folder is actually both using like TCP/IP port or something. So that might be something that will be part of the flakiness thing. So I guess we should actually grep for that.
Yeah, because I was just thinking that any test that uses that shouldn't be in parallel, right?
Exactly. I mean, we have the internet tests for that reason, and at least the talking through TCP. So we should have a look at that. I'll add it to my to-do.
Yeah. That one might even be like having a regularly scheduled job that checks that.
I just want to make sure so we don't hide the problem,
Yeah.
I mean, similarly to most stuff in Flaky, I guess, but just make sure that we don't run into those racy scenarios.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The only thing
my first to-do item for the flakiness was to start adding diagnostics to at least see why those tests are failing, if there is really a dangling null distance or what the issue is. And then once we identify the patterns, because we really had no idea why those tests were failing so quickly, right? So we need to investigate each one of those pretty much.
Yeah.
And see, is the test really flaky, does it need to be rewritten, or there's an issue with the CI itself?
I think a few of them will be, very reproducible once, a master lingers. I mean, you'll have I think it's 10 or 11 failed tests, and it's pretty reproducible. But I mean, it's obviously the first one we need to fix. And I brought it up prior, I think, as a suggestion to not run the test instead of running it and having it marked it flaky, because what will happen is that we'll have 11 fails, and if we mark all those 11 as a fail, it's actually, or as a flaky test, it's actually just the first one that's the problem, not the other 10, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah, no, you're correct. And in fact, this would require a fix in the test runner, right? To kill node after each test.
Yeah, that could be one way. I just want to, I mean, it's one test. We should really just, try and get it fixed. But yeah, I guess we could explore that. My thought was at least start by killing processes between runs, and then move from there. But I guess what we could do is actually kill it if we have to between runs.
Killing processes between runs is definitely a must.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Do we use more than one executor on any machine?
Yeah.
Right, because that complicates the killing a bit.
Do we?
Yeah, 2 of the CentOSs runs GCC 41 version, and it's mostly just used, or it is only used for libuv. But all I know is that we can't make the assumption that any Node.js process running under the IOJS or Node.js user will be killable. So we need to have a bit more finesse. I was thinking of just grepping for the slave in PS output, like slave ID, because that's unique. So that would probably be better.
But could that be a source of flakiness? I mean, can those processes interfere?
I mean, since we're not running, 2 Node.js test suites at the same time at the same machine, rather just having 2 Jenkins environments at the same machine, I don't think that's a problem. I mean, if we can't even compile Node on GCC 41, so if someone tries to, they'll probably fail before running into the test suite. But I just know that we can't make the assumption that we can kill old Node processes at the end of a run. We just need to have a bit more finesse in how we're grepping for those.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Okay, so this wasn't even on the agenda, but I guess it's a big topic for conversation. Shall we move on to the next agenda item?
Yeah, that's right. We should at least follow up. I mean, we have a few things between all of us in terms of to-dos, so we should make sure we actually get that recorded. I think we have it down in follow-ups now, at least. So.
Yeah, follow-ups. I can also add who's going to do it. If you want.
Yeah, I'll do it as well.
Make CI slaves redundant. Do we even have an inventory of slaves?
That's a good question. I think we had a list somewhere on like Google Docs or something, where we also had like passwords and stuff.
Ideally, Jenkins should give us this.
Yeah, no, that's the easiest way. But it doesn't show the ones that are kind of work in progress. So.
How about the Ansible inventories? Shouldn't that give us an overall list?
Well, this is a template for the installation script. But we want to know how many redundant instances we have per slave type.
Right, but the Ansible inventory lists the ones that are installed, right? Like the main file says, here's the names of the ones we're going to install with each template.
Oh, that's it. Well, I guess the follow-up would be like extract or build an inventory.
Yeah, I think the best source would kind of be the Jenkins output, I would say. But yeah, I mean, if README and the what's that file called and setup? Ansible inventory. Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, like if it's not right, we should almost look at that, and if there's something missing, look to see if we've missed adding it there, and if not, then we know we don't have to, right?
Okay, once we have the inventory, then we can prioritize the nodes that are singletons.
Right.
The labels only have one slave.
I also, we were talking about this just before you logged on, Michael, but we were talking about perhaps shuffling stuff around, because now when we have a bit of available resources at Azure, so that means that we could perhaps take one of the redundant machines on Rackspace for Windows stuff, move it over, and then use the available resources at Rackspace to kind of like add redundancy where we are short.
Sure.
So, for instance, perhaps a free BSD because we don't need that much resources for those. So we can probably the Windows machines we have at Rackspace are pretty beefy. So like we can take one down and then add 4 more VMs if we wanted to.
Sure, and I guess it's related to the other thing that I want to see is I did get the okay from SoftLayer to provide some resources as well. So if there's any machines that we need on that front, I can probably contribute some more VMs as well.
That's great. I should add that here somewhere.
So I think there's two that I know of that I'm going to start with. One is the dedicated machine for benchmarking, then another VM for James wanted one for running the Canary and the Gold Mine tests. And then I guess if we have, if there's gaps or there were any other things we were looking for some more x86 machines for.
Yeah, no, that's great. We should definitely
we can follow up on GitHub by opening an issue about making CI slaves redundant.
Yep.
And then there work on building the inventory and then figuring out where we're going to pull the resources from.
Okay.
I'll do that.
So that captures most of the other items.
Yep.
Sort of related to that, I want to ask what all things I'll need to put in place to get PPC to be delivered like the other platforms. So say for P-Linux, it sounds like I should get 2 of each machine, right? We only have 1 now.
I mean release packaging?
Yeah, like what is it? What all do we need to put in place for it to be just considered like any of the other platforms?
Yeah, so we usually have separate release machines, so at least be pairs, as you mentioned.
Okay.
I mean, we've been talking about cross-compiling, but I'm not sure how, if we're doing that for release builds just yet.
Yeah, I think to start with, it's Yeah. So anyway, so if I got a second one of each type for LE and big and yin, obviously I need to add them to the regression tests.
Yeah.
Anything else beyond that?
So for release, do they need to be redundant, or is it for testing that we want a redundant? I mean, I know for testing, ideally we want a redundant. But for release, do we just want a separate machine, or do we want a pair just for release?
I mean, if you look at what we have now, it's not so much about redundancy when it comes to release. It's just availability and that we have a separate environment where, you know, less people and we have stricter access to them.
Okay.
So that's been a requirement so far.
So then it would be one machine dedicated for release, and then if you want it in testing, then ideally a pair, so that they have redundancy in case one breaks.
Exactly.
Right. So ideally, if I can get 2 more of each, that would be good.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. I assume the load on the release ones is lower than the regular test ones, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Okay.
not busy at all. We have nightlies, releases, and then like some tests in between, but it's not so much running test wait. So.
Okay. So I get the machines, add them to the regression tests. Any other steps I need to add to my list?
I mean, Rod is probably the last guy we want to talk about this, or the first guy we want to talk to about this. So, you know, we can just probably open an issue about it, and he'll just come in and say, it looks good to me.
Yep. Okay, so yeah, I'll open an issue that says, okay, what all do we need to do? I know these things so far. What else?
Exactly. I'll add that in the notes.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll open the issue.
Perfect.
Okay. What about the benchmarking machine?
Right. So then the last thing was just, I proposed in that issue a particular machine. I just wanted to see if there's any feedback on whether you guys thought that made sense, or we need something bigger. I don't know.
Let's look.
The benchmarking work group meeting is tomorrow, so I'm going to get their feedback as well. But I thought you guys might have some input.
The more the better, obviously. The other machines, I think the benchmarking machine we have is like 16 gigs per gram, like 4 core or something ish. So I guess like SSD is always preferable if that's available.
Yeah, it's just a matter of cost. I looked at the SSD cost as much as the machine per month.
Oh, okay.
Mostly because like the ones that were available, they were fairly big. Like they were like 800 gig SSDs. So.
Oh.
So it's like they're available if necessary, but the question is it worth it in terms of the overall?
So how are they gonna run? Are they gonna run on a daily basis, or are they gonna run as part of the regression test for every pull request?
I think to start with, it may even be, it may be that we would run it release to release. I think longer term we might want to try and run it. I don't know if we're ever going to get to the point where we'd want to run those on every single pull request, because they could be quite long running in general.
Right, so that would be a different type of test, huh?
Yeah. Like it's like Acme Air is a sort of server-side one. We might run the V8 tests. So I mean, we could potentially. I think to start with, we'll just try and do it for every release, and then we'd want to move towards, could we get it to be running nightly if it made sense?
Well, if it's bare metal, you're looking at like pretty much constant allocation, so it makes sense to run it as much as possible.
Yeah. No, true. Basically, as long as it's got cycles, we could keep running it.
I guess from the build group, my only input would be that we hook it up through Jenkins, and we have access so we can manage, make sure it's available and online. And then I think the benchmark group is probably more relevant in terms of figuring out usage and how to best utilize it. and
Sure.
and obviously also requirements.
Okay. Yeah, no, my plan was we should just hook it up the way I'd hooked up the other one. So.
Yep. Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Yeah, like I said, if it's bare metal, we might as well run it continuously and
Agreed.
like real continuous integration and catch regressions maybe that way, if anybody's looking.
Yeah, that's somebody has to look is the only thing. So.
It would be pretty amazing. I mean, this is probably for the benchmark group as well, but just start to collect that information and graph it so we can do it on nightlies and just kind of, get a over time picture of how we're progressing.
Yeah, no, that would be good.
So how long is a benchmark run?
Well, we're still working on defining the benchmarks. I think the Acme Air, I'm thinking it's like a 5 to 10 minute type run.
So it would be theoretically possible to put it as part of regression testing. Is it reliable enough?
Well, we haven't actually started. It should be reliable enough in terms of, I guess it depends, what you mean by reliable. Like you'd have to have allow a certain variation, because it's always going to vary run to run to a certain extent.
Right, but if the machine doesn't run any other services, I mean, the variance should be pretty controllable, right?
Yeah, I agree, although I know from our internal performance groups, it's always a challenge to get it to be reliable enough for a machine to make the decision.
Right, so maybe on a per request basis, it wouldn't be very useful. It would be more useful as a graph to see a trend. Like,
Yeah.
Okay, if you see the last 10 runs are slower than the previous 10 runs, maybe something happened, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think a nightly run where you could then see the graph, that would make sense.
Yeah, I think so too.
So the first goal is get the machine in, then actually get the get some benchmarks running, and then once we have that, yeah, I think the next step would be could we graph those and present that somewhere, and then as we add more things, have them show up in the graphs.
Yeah, and then have somebody look at it on a periodic basis.
Yeah. Yeah, if we have a graph, then somebody looking once a week or something at least isn't too bad, and certainly on the releases. So.
Okay, yeah, I don't have any input on the machines themselves.
Okay.
Bastemore did mention that SSDs are more reliable.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could just, like, if we have enough RAM, just mount a TempFS and use that. I mean, it wouldn't be, it depends on what we're looking to measure, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah, the biggest thing is consistency between runs.
Exactly.
So
Yeah, you could experiment with that. I would experiment with that. I guess getting consistent readings would be a good thing for this type of machine, right?
would it be worth? Sorry, would it be worth running, doing an actual build on the same machine, so that we could get a trend of the build time for Node? I mean, it's probably mostly going to follow V8, but
Yeah, it's certainly possible. So you're saying so we could see it takes you X amount of time to build it.
And what would we use that data for? I mean, most developers already can see that, or we can see that through CI even, right?
yeah. Well, it's pretty high variation on CI though, because you've got machines with almost random load, and whether the cache is warm or not.
Yeah, and we use seed cache as well, so it's just like it's not really measuring the build.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see a problem doing it. I just don't know what we should use the numbers for. I mean, it's one machine will take 5 minutes and the other one will take 10. I don't know how to use that information, but if you see a use for it, go for it.
Yeah, I guess the machines could be used to get any benchmarks for which we want accurate results, right?
Yeah, I guess that's really what I'm thinking of. Is just what else can we benchmark if we've got the resource available?
Yeah, exactly. So
how to
maybe the
maximize
build could be it, but maybe not, but maybe something else. So that's good to keep in mind. Okay, so I guess Michael, the ball is in your court to get in this machines going and benchmarking working group to get the test running. And if you need any help from the build working group, definitely with Jenkins should be pretty trivial.
Yep. Yep. No. Yeah. So it sounds like pretty much what I expected. That yeah, we'll do it in Jenkins. Otherwise, the benchmarking work group, I'll get their input to figure out exactly what machine to start with.
Okay. So was that the last agenda item?
I guess we had the discussion that Rod was mentioning. Let me just open that. So he was talking about, where are we?
Unifying.
Yeah, 164. So getting 0, 10, and 12 builds out. I don't feel very comfortable talking about that because I haven't been a big part of it. Alexis, what are your thoughts?
Me neither. I don't know very much about the release process. I was onboarded on the 0.12 release process, but I don't know much about the 4.0 release process. So I guess we still need to study to get this stuff going.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think he's done a kind of a to-do and what we need to migrate, I guess. It's just that, you know, I don't know what the real gap is between the old type of releases and how we do it today. The way we do it today is pretty streamlined in terms of how it works and how it's distributed, and everything is available through the build repo, so that's great. But it's just that I don't exactly. I think there's going to be, you know, questions about what Sun, like SmartOS version we're going to be running and stuff. So I just feel a bit. I don't have all the information to actually have a say here.
Do we still have access to all the old CI? You know, if we need to get a 10 and 12 build out tomorrow.
Yes, we do. We preserved it just for the release.
Right. Okay.
Just for the 0.x release, and we can access it to dissect the scripts and figure out what they're doing. There's also a release guide for it.
Right.
So that knowledge is still available, basically. But I think we need somebody who's familiar with the latest release process to drive this process.
Yeah, this is probably more for Rod to talk and
that would be
drive.
Rod. Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess the reason he's bringing it up is that we have like a pending proposal for both a 10 and 12 release. So it's something we should. I mean, since we don't know enough, I think we should improve in that, and then we should just assist Rod with what we can.
We need Rod to write this.
The duplicate Rod.
Yeah, let's clone Rod.
Yeah, I think James had volunteered to be one of the people who could do releases. I wonder if him, getting him involved in that makes sense.
You mean for the old releases or for the new one?
I forget which he volunteered. I think he might have volunteered for both. Certainly for the old one, I thought.
Okay.
Yeah, I think James volunteered for the old one. A few people did. Colin, I think. Myself, I participated in the onboarding, so I know where to find that information on how to do an old release.
Okay.
The question is to integrate it in the new process, right?
Yep. Have release builders as part of our CI.
I guess that's it. Okay.
Yeah. Anything else? Do we have any open questions?
I think that's good for today on my end.
Cool.
Okay. So the next meeting will be tentatively in 3 weeks. I will send a call for agenda a few days before, like this time. And also you can tag issues or pull requests with the WG agenda table.
Great.
Okay.
Have a nice day. Thank
Thanks.
you.
You too, guys.
Talk to you guys later. Bye.
All right.
Bye.